I like to tell people I'm not a militant atheist. I'm not going to go fainting into the bushes if I see somebody's nativity scene.
I've not yet met a person who doesn't have faith in something.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonin, faith columnist and features writer for the Forum, author, and speaker. In December 2021, Rob Port of the Plain Talk podcast invited Devlyn Brooks, a Lutheran pastor and fellow journalist, and me onto his show to talk about religion. An avowed non-believer, Rob wanted to hear our thoughts about the reported declines in religious adherents, and Pastor Brooks and I gave it our best shot. Well, that show ended up being the most popular of the year among Plain Talk listeners. It also renewed my thoughts about possibly starting a podcast myself. When I launched Matters of Soul Importance in January, Pastor Brooks was my first guest, sharing whether Jesus and journalism can coexist. That episode prompted a desire to get our original trio back together around Christmas time again to dive into who Jesus is to each of us. I'm pleased at work to have this discourse regarding this important, albeit controversial, figure from three different perspectives. So today, these two gentlemen will help answer the question, and I'll throw in my 2 cents as well. Who is Jesus? More about today's guests. Rob Port is the host of the podcast Plain Talk and columnist for the Forum newspaper, which reaches throughout North Dakota and beyond, focusing on political news and current events in this state. He lives and works in Minot with his wife and their 3 children. The Reverend Devlyn Brooks shepherds the Faith Lutheran Church in Wolverton, Minnesota, writes a Finding Faith column for the Forum, and blogs at findingfaithin.com. Previous to his current interim role as CEO for Churches United for the Homeless in Moorhead, Minnesota, he worked in journalism for 30 years, more than half for the Forum. He and his wife, Shelley, reside in Moorhead and are parents to 4 adult children, 2 dogs, and 2 cats. Well, that's enough to get us started. Now let's move into the heart of the interview. Welcome both to you to Matters of Soul Importance. I'm so glad it worked out to get the 3 of us back together to return to the conversation we started 3 years ago on your podcast, Rob. So talking about religion in America. So I also hoped to do some kind of part 3. So here we are, and good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning, Roxanne.
How are things up in Minot, Rob, this morning?
It says sunshiny and a brisk 46 degrees.
That sounds about similar to us, so that's good. I'm going to try to get a walk in later today, so hopefully. But we're going to kind of go back into a little bit of the conversation we had a couple years ago. But before we do that, I want to mention I owe each of you some gratitude for my own podcasting journey. Rob, you were the first person I reached out to, probably because you'd had me on your podcast and I knew that you were doing a good job with yours. And you gave me some helpful advice. I wasn't quite ready to dive in at that time, but I appreciate that. And then Devlyn, you were my first guest when I started in January, and I needed someone who was gracious. So you did that. So thank you so much to both of you for helping me get started here on Matters of Soul Importance. So, I'm super excited about today's topic. Who is Jesus? We're just 5 days by the time this drops from Christmas, so we got to get into the Christmas spirit here. And this topic tends to be on many people's minds this time of year, Christian or otherwise, especially in our American culture with its long history of Christian underpinnings. But we know that this has changed over the years too, and currently we're watching young people especially leave the Christian faith in droves, and that was one of the things we discussed with you, Rob, a couple years ago. So it's good to have discussions about it since Christianity has been such a strong aspect of our society, and in my estimation, continues to influence our society in some very important ways, I'd say, ways that are a matter of soul importance. So Devlyn and I are obviously on the same team here, as it were, in terms of believing in Jesus, though we each have different traditions that play into how we live that out from both a Lutheran and Catholic perspective. And then Rob, on the other hand, grew up in a Christian home, but later left the faith because of that. And since I've had Devlyn on before, I think I'm going to start with Rob to give a solid grounding of where we're all coming from. So Rob, you didn't start out as atheist, and I don't know if that's how you designate yourself, atheist, agnostic. You can share about that as we go along, but why don't you talk about a little bit about the role that faith played in your growing up years, and maybe more specifically to who Jesus was to you then, and then we'll get into what Jesus and who Jesus is to you now. So kind of get a sense of your faith background.
Well, certainly. I atheist is what I use. I'm full bore, so I guess that's what it is.
Okay.
Although I like to tell people I'm not a militant atheist. I'm not going to go fainting into the bushes if I see somebody's nativity scene. I don't. Religion doesn't bother me. I think like with anything, it can be good and it can be bad. Religion is such an enormous thing, and it takes in so many different avenues, and some of it's just very nice, community minded. Hey, let's get together and do good works and try to support one another and be charitable. And then there's cults. So it runs the gamut. It doesn't like with anything. There's good and bad, and I'm not. I think atheists get a bad rap for being out there like wanting to stop people from practicing their religion. And obviously I'm coming always from a political perspective, but my connotation of religion is that it's a part of our society. We invite it all into the public square, and we treat everybody equally, whatever their faith, whatever their creed. As for the way I was brought up Lutheran. My family is Scandinavian and German, so we were Lutherans. My grandmother more so than my mom, and I think my early participation was probably more to satisfy my grandmother, who was very interested in seeing me confirmed and seeing me go to Sunday school and everything. After confirmation in particular, it kind of dropped off, and we were very much a family that really only went to church on holidays. Every once in a while, my mom would get a kick, and for a couple months, we'd be really involved in church, and then it would kind of peter out again. I never really found a lot. I liked the singing and the music sometimes, but for the most part, I didn't really find a lot in church that appealed to me. But I think even up to young adulthood, 18, 19 years old, I would have described myself as being Christian, being a believer, but maybe at a very low level. At that point, when something happened where we had some relatives, I had a cousin who was about my age, and her parents, and actually I think I was cousins with her parents, so she was like my second cousin or something. I'm not sure, but she was my age because my cousins were older than me, and they were Jehovah's Witness. And their daughter got leukemia, and she died. And she died without getting medical intervention that could have saved her life. And the reason, and I'm not saying it would have saved her life. I mean, with something like that, you just don't know. But they chose not to engage in that medical intervention. In some ways, I guess my feeling is they let her die because of their religious belief. And then that was really the beginning for me of a lifelong journey of studying belief systems, and not just obviously my day-to-day work as a political columnist. Political belief systems are a big part of what I do, but it's sometimes hard to see a distinction between a political belief system and a religious belief system. I mean, there's a lot of overlap there, and I'm very interested in when a belief system can cause people to act against their own self-interest, or cause people to do something that is objectively wrong. So I've always been very interested in cults. I've always been very interested in political movements like, say, communism in the Soviet Union. Why did these people do this to themselves? A lot of that, but that also, caused me to arrive at a position where I don't believe in the supernatural aspect. I call that, I don't mean to be demeaning, but the supernatural aspects of religion, I just have no truck with. As far as the philosophical teachings of religion, now that's something I can get into. So I don't know if that helps explain where I'm at, but that's what it is in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, I have a couple questions. I'm going to bring you back there to that time. How old were you when your cousin was going through that? I'm just kind of curious about your formation.
I'd 16 15. Yeah, I must have been 15.
Okay. And then another question I have, I'm just kind of curious about how you were formed. Can you think of any like positives about the faith as you were growing up, like any good experiences? I don't know if you have any of those kind of memories. I'm just curious what those were, if you had any, and then later, obviously they were overshadowed. But do you have anything good to say about any of your Christian upbringing?
Sure. I liked the community aspect of it. One of the things I always liked was the fellowship after the service, where everybody was just kind of in a room and they were getting caught up. And it was almost like, and obviously this, when I was participating, this was well before social media, but it was almost like a real world social media, right? Where you met up with who was at the church, and maybe you weren't necessarily expecting to see somebody there, or sometimes you'd meet new people. I really enjoyed that. Youth group too was a lot of fun. I met some friends I'm still friends with today. In particular, we would do a fundraiser where we would make Super Bowl subs, where we had like we'd make subs and then like 2 liters of soda, and it was a package and people could buy them, and we'd deliver them on before the Super Bowl for people's parties. And that was always a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. So the community aspects of it, I really enjoyed.
Okay. And then another question that cropped up as you were talking about Jehovah's Witnesses. And then would you say that, like, so your aversion to religion kind of started there, but then you started questioning other religions? Would you say that, do you kind of lump religion all into one category, or how do you approach it? Are some better than others, or do you not really have an opinion on that?
Well, of course,
what are your thoughts?
yeah, I mean, of course, some are better than others, and it's so hard. I mean, obviously, there's extremist strains of just about any religion you can think of. So I mean, there's extremist Christians, and there's certainly just mainstream, normal old Christians, and within Christianity, there's all sorts of. I don't think that religion is inherently bad at all. I think in many ways it can be good, and I'm not here to judge people if praying and believing and having faith makes you feel good and you feel like it makes you a better person. Who am I to object? I'm not going to object. Where I think it can become very dangerous is if you're putting faith in leaders who can lead you astray, and sometimes religions. I don't want hostility to being questioned, or it sets down certain strictures and it says that this is the truth, and people who question the truth are heretics or outside, and certainly we have a lot of examples of that from history. I think that's where it can get dangerous, and it can lead us down some bad roads. Catholicism specifically, we have everything from the Magdalene laundries in Ireland to the boarding schools where we're still digging up mass graves in North America to this day. The sex scandals and everything else. I mean, there's a dark side of it, and it's not always. Some of it's just humanity and not religion, but some of it was done under the auspices of religion. It was done under the idea that we're helping people, or we're evangelizing, or we're spreading the good message, and in reality, it was hurting people. And I think sometimes religion, much as with politics, when people believe something fervently, they can almost become a weapon that can be used for some very bad things.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And with that in mind, I'm going to switch over to Devlyn. We have his full story on my podcast, and I'll put that in the show notes from the January episode, the very first episode. But Devlyn, why don't you give just a very brief history of your faith journey, just to catch people up real quick so they don't have to go back and listen to the whole hour. And then I want to actually have you comment on what Rob said from your perspective, and kind of share if anything popped out about his perception of religion or faith or whatever you want to say. But let's just get caught up a little bit with your story.
Sure. Well, I am ordained in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, so very prevalent Lutheran church here in the Upper Midwest, of course. And I've been ordained now for 4 years, and I've been serving the church that I'm at for 8. So I've been bivocational the entire time that I've been a pastor. So I previously was in the media, like the two of you, and more recently switched careers. But I did have a period in my life where I did leave the church. So I grew up in a small denomination known as the Church of Christ, and lived in a small town. Our family went through a challenging divorce. And what happens a lot of times, of course, in small communities is people pick sides. And I perceived at that time in my young years that our church chose kind of our father's side of this issue. And I felt like I had abandoned my mom and us kids. And so I started to grow some pretty strong resentment. And by the time I was about 12, I made the conscious decision that I was just leaving the church. Now, I can't confidently say that I left religion. I can say I left the church, and I was out of the church for probably 25 years before I came back. I came back because of my kids. I wanted them to have at least some religious instruction, and so when my kids came back into the church, I came back into the church, and over time found my way back into active faith. And of course, that led to a call to seminary and ultimately to pastorhood too.
I know that the word religion, sometimes even by Christians, can be sort of a bad word in terms of, I think they maybe connote it with ritual and not having that relationship with Jesus. And so, like you were saying, it was important for you. Obviously, there was something good, but you had a negative experience too, like Rob, and in that way, you have a similar story. But there was a difference in something happened a little bit different with you, where you were drawn back to it in times of difficulty, and you felt like you needed that, and you needed that structure also for your children. But there was something more, right? As far as not just the community, that was part that, Rob said that he can see the value in, but there was something more, I think, as you've explained it before, in the person of Christ. So we can kind of start going into that direction as far as answering the question, who is Jesus? Because I think ultimately those of us who have remained or grown closer in faith to Jesus and whatever religious aspect, but it's because of Jesus, the person. So why don't you share about how you confronted Jesus maybe in a new way as you were coming back to the church?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't even know if I know that answer. So if I can hearken back to what Rob had said earlier, interestingly, I'd love to have a side conversation with him, because Rob tends to use the religion word a lot, and I don't. I think the word religion is overbearing, and it scares a lot of people and instills a lot of fear. And so when I talk, I often use the word faith, and because I think, quite frankly, there's a lot of people that can relate to the word faith over religion, because I've not yet have met a person who doesn't have faith in something. I know Rob has faith in something. Rob has faith in decency. He has faith in, the order of government. Rob has faith in kindness, and he's demonstrated that over the years in his podcasts and his writing. And so I think there's a gap that we can bridge there. Obviously, that's my own personal theology, right? So when you say I came back into the faith, interestingly enough, for me, it's a relationship with the Holy Spirit, and which sometimes seems odd for a lot of people, because I landed in the Lutheran church, and I felt called to being ordained in a Lutheran church, but to me, Jesus is the Son of Christ, or the Son of God. Our Christ Savior died on the cross for our salvation, and is there in the kingdom. For me, the personhood of God is I make more sense of is the Holy Spirit that's active influence today here on earth, and how I feel it may not be the same as how others feel it. And I think there may be some behind the scenes forces at play that move Rob where he's going and move Rob where I'm going. And we just may call them different things.
I'm curious how you got through the transition from sort of shirking that background and the faith and coming back into it. Like, what made you trust in it again? Because it had let you down. And just like Rob had felt let down, what, Devlyn, was it that allowed you to give it another shot?
Compassion. The faith community that some may call it serendipity. I feel like there was some divine push there that our children and I ended up at was a congregation that had a couple of pastoral leaders that saw a very broken man and came alongside of me and helped repair me. And it came through compassion and empathy, and not through some of the things that Rob has lifted up, not through judgment and shaming, but the simple fact that they presented in a human form God's mercy and compassion. And that's what brought me back to the church.
Rob, I'm just curious, why don't we have you answer that question? Who is Jesus? So we know where you're coming from on that. At this point, who is Jesus to you?
Yeah, I think, and again, I apologize for seeing everything through a political lens, but this is who I am.
That's okay.
What makes me good at my day job. But I think Jesus is a person, a historical figure who existed under Herod the Great, or in the time of Herod the Great. And we have non-Christian historical record for him. In the Roman record, Tacitus wrote about him. Josephus wrote about him. So you have Jesus. There was a Jewish leader named Jesus who existed at that time, upon whose teachings the tradition of Christianity was built. I think that's real, and I think even secular scholars there's something of a consensus around that he's real. But then there's also Jesus, the symbol, which means a lot of different things. And something a while back I got really fascinated with religious art, and in particular Christian art, and the different ways in which Jesus was portrayed in different parts of the world at different eras in history. So, for instance, in the Scandinavian tradition, Jesus looks very Scandinavian. You walk into a Lutheran church and Jesus has blue hair, or not blue hair, blonde hair and blue eyes and a jaw and a beard, and he looks almost like a Viking. You go to a church maybe in Europe somewhere, maybe Eastern Europe somewhere, Jesus tends to have dark hair, and he tends to have maybe a Slavic look about him. And it's really sort of a idea, I know in the Christian tradition, God was created or man was created in the image of God. In some ways, obviously from the perspective of a non-believer, it's almost like, depending on where you're at, they create God in the form of themselves. I think that's really interesting. And then even if you look at like Depression era Christian art, Jesus looks kind of like a factory worker. I mean, there's just a lot of very interesting things in that I think build into, what Jesus is to people. I think, and it's always very interesting when I hear people talk about having a personal relationship with Jesus, or having Jesus as my personal savior. I hear that sometimes, and I don't know if that's specific to certain denominations, but I think that's really interesting in saying that Jesus is a symbol that can be very personal. Jesus is kind of, as an idea, it kind of varies from faith to faith and from person to person. So I guess that's my answer, is Jesus is the real historical figure, and then Jesus, the idea that has evolved over time in some ways, and evolved from tradition to tradition, culture to culture.
So now my Catholic sensibility will kick in here, and I want to comment on a few things that you said. I think as far as the depictions of Jesus, I think it's just simply that what you said, people make him into what they are and what they have known. But I think that's what artists do. They tend to, if you look at the artist and you look at the people they create, they're kind of looking like themselves, looking like their families, because that's kind of what they know. I don't think that we have to put so much emphasis on that as far as that's what Jesus looks like, and my God is this color, and my God is, so then I can't relate. I think it's okay for us to have different visions of who we think Jesus might look like. And I think it's just artistic expression. I don't think it has to be a detraction, but I do understand your point.
I wasn't bringing it up as a detraction either.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting.
Right. Okay. Well, so I'm just going to offer something. In the Catholic tradition, we revere Mary as Jesus's mother, and so it's interesting because I've had just recently discussions with my friends, and we love that Mary is depicted in so many different cultures. Like for Our Lady of Guadalupe, when she appeared there, she was Mexican, and she is our patron of. We consider her our patron of the North America Catholics, and so even though she has brown skin, she's our girl. and there's lots of different from all over the world. I've gone to the Basilica in Washington D.C., and there's all these different shrines of Mary, and she's African, she's Japanese, she's every different culture you can think of, and I just love that. I love the diversity of the artists who are drawn to their depiction of Jesus, his mother, and Jesus himself. So anyway, I think that's, but that's interesting to hear your perspective on that. And you can go ahead and clarify if you felt like I perceived that wrongly there. I don't know if you have any comments.
No. I just, I wasn't me attacking or saying, oh, this is inconsistent. Why don't they have there's no, for the same reason. Sometimes you look at like kings in England, and the way they're depicted over time. And a lot of times it was driven by politics, or a lot of times what was going on culturally at the time. King Arthur is kind of a very interesting figure in the different ways he's been portrayed in literary traditions and artistic traditions. It's just stuff like that I think is just fascinating. And Jesus, the idea, I think, falls into that same category.
Yeah. And one more comment, and then I'll put it back to Devlyn. But Jesus as the personal Lord and Savior, that isn't something Catholics say a lot, although we actually do find, we do have a relationship with Jesus, a personal relationship, and a lot of people, I think that we don't. So we would say we have a personal relationship with Jesus. For us, one of the ways we do is in the Eucharist. We believe that when Jesus left and said, "This is my body, this is my blood," that he left us this like physical manifestation of him, so that we would, feel his presence not only spiritually but also physically, body, blood, soul, and divinity. Is we believe that is truly him, and that we take him into us and become like him, and that we have to keep doing that and keeping our souls cleansed. But in that way, it is very personal because he actually becomes a part of us, at least for a time. So,
transubstantiation has always been something that's that is a hill that I have never been able to get over. Like I don't.
Right. Well, there's some philosophy behind it too, and in years, current days, philosophy isn't as relied upon. I think when we're talking about religion, it is something that has kind of been left aside. But so there's a whole philosophical question when it comes to matter and what we see and what is real. But yeah, it's I'm sure it seems like magic for those who are on the outside of it, or something really strange. And I know we've been accused of cannibalism and all kinds of things. From the inside, it doesn't seem that way. But sure. I'm going to flip it back to Devlyn, because maybe you can comment a little bit more on whatever that struck you. But I know that personal Lord and Savior thing would be maybe something more that evangelical Lutherans would say to describe that difference between religion and faith. And I do understand that. I want to come back to that because words are important to me. And I tend to use faith a lot too, not because I think religion is a bad word or it's a detraction, but I also understand that some do. And so I try to be sensitive to that. But at the same time, I personally don't have a problem describing my relationship with God and how that is lived out as religion. So, but I understand the other side too. So I'm going to let you comment on any of that, Devlyn.
Okay, just drop all that in my lap.
Yeah, just there.
Yeah. Well, obviously, communion could be a whole podcast on itself between the three of us, because I think for a lot of those that don't partake or just they may be shocked to learn that every denomination kind of has a different philosophy about communion and the sacraments. Just like the Catholic Church has more sacraments than the Lutheran Church does, and so I think it's really important to note that there are those differences. For me, it's interesting to hear Rob talk about Jesus because I have to say that that Rob's more informed about Jesus than I am. I see the figure that's in the Gospels, and I believe in his teachings about how it is that we're supposed to care for those that are the most vulnerable about us. I don't think those of us that practice a faith have the corner on that market. I don't believe that you have to practice a faith to also be a good human and embrace compassion and empathy. And so I think Jesus is a faith teacher. I think Jesus is someone who demonstrated a way of how it is that we're supposed to live out the practice of our faith, because quite frankly, if we leave our faith in the church on Sunday mornings when we leave, we're failing. Faith isn't about the hour or two that you spend in the wooden or brick building or chapel, or faith is what you do on the outside and how you espouse following what those teachings are. And so I even though it's interesting that I don't necessarily know how to define my relationship with Jesus himself, what I love about this period of the year is that it also, for me, ushers in this presence of the Holy Spirit. And for me, not to get all Trinitarian here, but I think those who practice faith, they have a particular expression of the Godhead that they are closer to or makes more sense. And for me, it is the Holy Spirit.
So I'm thinking of something I meant to circle back to, and I'm kind of being a little bit facetious here, but Jesus with blue hair. What do you think, Rob?
No, that was me. I meant to say blue eyes instead of.
I know, but I loved it because I think Jesus. Who knows that Jesus today could be depicted that way, and maybe that would bring comfort to someone. I don't know, but anyway.
I kind of agree with you that it's not a bad thing insofar as Jesus is an idea or represents a set of ideas or a philosophy or theology. Making it personal to you makes a lot of sense to me, in the same way that, in politics, we're having a big old debate about what it means to be a conservative right now. And a lot of people now don't view me as a conservative anymore because I haven't followed the Republican Party down certain rabbit holes that we're not going to get into on this show. And so to me, like I have a very personal relationship with my set of ideas, and it doesn't always match. And I don't feel obligated to, do something that I perceive as wrong. And this really, I guess, again, gets into my attitude about religion. I am not going to be led into doing something that I feel like is wrong because the political party that I ostensibly belong to or identify with is going in that direction. And that's, again, I think that gets back to one, in a lot of ways, I think religion is great. When it's about fellowship, when it's about doing good works, when it's about, teaching a set of ideas that can help people be healthier and happier in their lives. I think all that's wonderful. And I think there's many paths to that end. I mean, maybe some of it's Buddhism, maybe it's Catholicism, maybe it's, paganism. I don't know. But I think it can be good. Where it always gives me pause, and this isn't even unique to religion or faith, is that, and I know I'm using both of those terms, and I know you guys see a distinction, and maybe religion is loaded or people don't perceive it that well. But I think you understand what I'm saying, like practicing or having adherence to a set of ideas, because it can happen politically too. When you look at how many political philosophies have been perverted and used to do terrible things, I think there's something about group dynamics with human beings where you get in and you belong to a community, and if that community takes an exit off the good path, and starts doing bad things, people can follow it. I think in some ways it can be a tool that can be used to build a house, or it can be used to kill somebody. That's and I guess maybe that's my skepticism of it. And I'm not I'm not a very good joiner by nature. I don't I don't really like belonging to groups or movements or feeling like I have to have loyalty to those things. I just I have a set of ideas of what I think is right is wrong, and I'm loyal to that. And also willing to change that as I have new life experiences and information. So I don't know, maybe that's not all that different from faith. Devlyn said that I'm pursuing something as well, and maybe I am. I'm just doing it in a very, very different way, maybe than the people who have faith.
Rob, I'm inclined to ask you something, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but because I think what we're trying to describe in a way is a worldview too. And I think that's where Devlyn is correct. I mean, we all have a worldview, and different people, may not talk about it as faith or religion, but that's it's the way we view the world, right? That frame that we use. And so one of the questions I have is, what is your thought about how this world exists without like a prime mover?
Yeah. I mean, I think the prime mover can be chance. The universe is infinite as far as we know. I mean, it's certainly so gigantic, almost beyond our ability to comprehend. And I think within a context like that, it's the old, you get enough monkeys banging away on enough typewriters, one of them's going to write Hamlet. I don't know. I feel like that's it. I know. I realize that for a lot of people, that's not enough. And I feel like that is because it's not enough, that is why humanity in so many different traditions has had to fill in a creation story, whether it's, turtles or God and the 7 days and Adam and Eve or whatever the tradition is. Humanity doesn't like unanswered questions. And so we feel like we have to answer the question. And so we come up with stories that explain it, that, I give people comfort. And I think generally they're harmless, but I think the reality is it was chance. I don't think it was guided. That being said, I realize how deeply unsatisfying that is for a lot of people, but.
Well, no, I'm just logically thinking about it. I guess have you ever read any of the statistics of what the chances really would be for this world to exist? I mean, they're phenomenally, astronomically, they're crazy. I mean, have you read those?
Yeah, I have. And we also live in a universe that is phenomenally, astronomically, literally huge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just can't imagine that it just happened. Like, how do you get material without material? Like, and I think it's a really legitimate question. I think, and I have a feeling Pastor Brooks, Devlyn would agree here possibly that we're not drawn to faith just to feel comfort and good feelings, although that certainly can help. And there's been studies done that people do fare better when they go to church and are faithful to that and have that community. Part of it is probably the community, but I think it's more than that. I think we feel accompanied. We feel like we believe that Jesus is personal because when he died, he was dying for each of us personally. It happened at a particular time in history, but he had us each individually in mind. We believe not only that there was a prime mover and a God that created all this, but that he did it out of love. I would say that his love spilled out. He is love, and it spilled out and created us to learn to love. And so, Devlyn, what are your thoughts about all this?
Yeah, I think it's interesting listening to Rob describe, going back to how did the universe take place, right? I think Rob can even agree that there is a narrative. How we all describe that narrative may come from a different standpoint. I mean, science still is a narrative. If you're trusting the definition of science of how the universe took place, I mean, that is still a narrative. And so that doesn't scare me. It doesn't bother me. If you trust in science, I think science and faith coexist. And you know, when you were talking, Roxanne, it was interesting. So this past week, I was invited to a ceremony at Minnesota State University Moorhead here in town. They were doing a kickoff ceremony to the American Indian History Month. And I apologize if I butchered that name. I believe that's the name. But I have a friend who is a Native American spiritual leader, and he was doing a conversation and was doing a peace pipe ceremony as part of the kickoff. And when I was there and witnessing what my friend was doing and showing and demonstrating the various ways that they use the pipe and the tobacco to perform their think ceremonies, it struck me how similar it was to the sacraments we have in our own church. You know, they're physical elements that they believe are wholly inspired. And so when I look at my friend Devlyn as a spiritual leader who's a Native American elder, I don't see any less confidence in him and his faith than I have in mine. And so I think there's a common strain. One of the things that rings true to me that has stuck with me all throughout seminary and into my service as a pastor is that there's this notion that God has to exist. And what if we ask the question if God just insists? God just insists that the universe happens and transpires. God insists in our lives. And that helps me reframe this conversation.
Interesting. And I like what you were saying about the Native American traditions, since I grew up in a reservation and experienced some of those. And recently I gave help to lead a retreat on spiritual warfare and it was on the saints. And I ended up telling a little bit of my history and my background growing up on the reservation. And one of the things I realized in putting together my talk was I never really met any atheists growing up on the reservation. There was a large percentage of Christians were Catholic. There had been a mission church there, and then there was a Lutheran church and Assemblies of God and Presbyterian that I remember, and then Nazarene. So there were different influences there, Christian. But I didn't grow up really hearing about atheism. I think between the Christians and the Native Americans who really were in tune to the spiritual world, it just wasn't something that was argued about. I didn't really even consider that there was no God until I got to college and started hearing murmurings of that. But anyway, so it's kind of interesting because growing up, we all just knew that there was God, and in a spiritual world, and we maybe called it different things, but that was a given. So it's just interesting to hear you talk about that. But so I think we'll take a little bit of break here, because on the other side of the break, I want to kind of go into more of Christmas, which is coming up, and I want to hear a little bit about what you each think of the holiday of Christmas and how you celebrate it, because I know that Rob has said before that despite his atheism, he loves parts of Christmas. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that after we come back from this pause on Matters of Soul Importance. We'll be right back.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Welcome back to Matters of Soul Importance. I'm Roxanne Solonen, and I have a couple of guests on the line, two gentlemen, one from Minot. We've got Rob Hort up there, and then over here in Fargo, we have Devlyn Brooks, who is a pastor. So I call him Devlyn, but some people call him Pastor Brooks. And so we are having a lively conversation about who is Jesus, and we have it from the perspective of an atheist, a Lutheran, and a Catholic. So it's really interesting. I love these conversations. I hope we can have more of them. I think it's important to listen to each other and to peer into each other's hearts and experiences and really try to understand where everyone's coming from. And I just think it's important. So maybe we'll start with you, Rob. You've mentioned before that you like Christmas music and aspects of Christmas. So how do you celebrate Christmas? You have kids. What sort of traditions do you have? What is it that you've taken from the Christian tradition of Christmas that you still enjoy in these years of your life?
Yeah, I mean, the food, the music, and you got to remember, I was raised this way, so I have a lot of fond memories from childhood with my grandmother in particular, and my family, and the music. I still live in the home I grew up in when I was a little boy. I actually bought it from my dad, so I still get the Christmas decorations out of the same attic. A lot of them are the same Christmas decorations. There's a lot of traditions there that I like. Which although it brings up an interesting thing about, you were talking about before the break being raised on the reservation and never even understanding that there could be a belief system that is organized around non-belief as far as religion goes. And, one thing that's been really hard is raising our children in that we live, first of all, we're mixed. My wife is a believer, although not she was raised Catholic, but has left Catholicism, has dabbled with Lutheranism, but right now isn't attending a church. But she is Christian. I am not. And from friends and family, we get grief sometimes where they don't feel like my children should be exposed to my belief system because they're upset that our children haven't been baptized. They want our children to be exposed to Christianity, and then maybe when they're older, exposed to their dad's point of view. And we've my wife and I get along great on this, and this is not a bone of contention with us, but I've never understood that. And in some ways, when it comes to religion, I've wanted my children to be raised almost independent of religion. And then if it's something that they choose as adults, then I think that's fine. I a lot of times have a big problem with bringing children and bringing them up in a belief system and not really giving them the opportunity to maybe think for themselves and choose it for themselves. And which I struggle with sometimes because we do celebrate Christmas, and I love Christmas and I love the religion, and it's hard. I love the old Rat Pack crooners singing Christmas carols, but I mean, those are about Jesus, right? Those are about Christianity, and it's all there. And I mean, I struggle with it sometimes, and it's hard. And the only thing I do is I'm honest with my kids and I'm direct about it. But those are some things I struggle with it. It's not always easy, but I love the food. I love the music. I love the presents. I like getting everybody together, and it's cold outside and it's warm inside, and we're playing board games and doing things together. I love all of that. And none of that really, in my mind, has anything to do with the religious aspects of it.
So interesting. And I was going to ask about that, about how you portray your faith or lack thereof, I guess, of faith in Jesus to your family. So thank you. That helps us understand. It's interesting to me because on the one hand, I feel like what you were just describing is the culture, right? The culture of your family, which includes their religion and their faith. And then at the same time, you said you don't think that children should be exposed. They should be able to leave it up to, whatever they decide in their adulthood, and that it should be kind of a neutral situation. But we do bring our culture and our family, we share who we are as a family, who we are as people, what our ideals are, what our faith is. Like that's just who we are. And these children are in that family unit. And of course they get to decide at some point if they're going to adhere to that or not. I guess I've heard that complaint that from atheists that we're just propagandists in our homes, but it's really perplexing to me because it's like, no, I'm just being who I am. I'm living out my culture, my beliefs with my kids, and they absolutely do have the right and choice. Of course, they have their own free will to make that choice for themselves or to go in a different direction. But I don't think I'm being harmful to them, as I've heard, like it's child abuse to expose children to
Yeah.
your religion.
And you'll notice I didn't say any of those things.
Yeah. No, I'm going off of other people that have said that to me, not you. Yeah, no.
I guess, one thing, and I don't know if it was intentional on part of my parents or the fact that I was the fifth child and a lot younger than my four sisters, and my parents were just exhausted and so weren't spending a lot of time paying attention to what I was reading. But I was, I lived a child where I was exposed to a lot of different belief systems and a lot of schools of thought. And I think that's a healthy thing. And I think sometimes, as for the most part, one criticism I will make of religion is that I think sometimes people who have the faith are not very open to interrogating it and interrogating it objectively, not interrogating it internally, but standing outside of it, being willing to stand outside of it and be willing to acknowledge maybe my faith isn't for everybody. Maybe not everybody has to believe what I believe. And I'm not saying necessarily that's what you believe, but I think there could be standing outside of it and saying, maybe it's okay if this path isn't for everybody, and maybe other paths are okay too. And I was thinking about when Devlyn was talking about the tobacco ceremony, and again, I apologize if that's not the right term for it, but it's or when you're asking me like, well, if you're an atheist, how do you think the world got here? It must have been something. And sure, you folks both believe it was something. There was some intelligence behind it, but your particular faiths have very specific stories or narratives about it. And often Christians don't want to talk about the specific narrative because it's like, okay, if we accept that there's an intelligence behind it, was it Adam and Eve in the garden and the snake, and they got kicked out and they went to the land of Nod and all of these things? I don't know. That kind of strains credulity in my mind, but we don't interrogate these things enough, I think, or particularly down maybe in the rank and file faithful. It's like, well, our family's Lutheran. Of course, our kids are going to be Lutheran. I think we could be a little more open-minded than that. And maybe Christians, if you're so certain about the message of your faith, or Christians or Muslims or whoever, if you're so certain about it, maybe don't be afraid. I mean, maybe don't feel like you got to catch the kids young.
So yeah, I'll take a first stab at that. I went through a time in college where I was really questioning where I was at. I guess I didn't have any problem with being a Christian because I was drawn to that. I had some experiences early on where it enlivened my life and helped me helped provide a framework that was helpful. And I felt like I did have a relationship with God, and that was a good and positive force in my life from a pretty early age. But I did question Catholicism as I married someone who wasn't Catholic at the time. He did later convert to Catholicism, but I did take a step back. And I also in college was being challenged by a lot of people and even other Christians. And so I guess it's interesting, I think, when I hear that Christians or people of faith don't question it. I guess I didn't feel a need to, I was exposed to other religions, but I was grateful for the religion I was in. I just was questioning the particulars of it. And so then I kind of went into a deep dive and read everything I could. And I was staying up till late in the night and finally came around to feeling just abundantly grateful. And I
think that's healthy. But sometimes I look at kids who, maybe they're homeschooled in a very religious tradition, and then they go to a religious college, and then they emerge and they marry somebody else from the same religion. And I think it's healthy to circulate your kids a little bit, get them out in the world and understand there's a lot of different belief systems, and it's okay to question it, and it's okay. And again, this is an outsider looking in. I think it would be healthy because there's a lot of families like that. It's very insular, and I think it would be healthier if they opened up a little more.
Just one more thing, and then I'm going to push it back to Devlyn. But it's interesting when you're talking about that, because I feel like what we want is to teach our children the best things that we've known, and the maturity that we've gained and the wisdom that we've gained, understanding that they might not accept it. But let's just take religion off the table. We want our kids to be healthy. We want to teach them to do healthy things, right? I mean, we want them to get an education. We want them to have their brains expanded, and that's part of like our role as parents, to want the best for our kids and to teach them the best that we know. And so I guess I don't see the problem there with also like teaching them about the religion that our family grew up in, knowing, again, being aware that they're going to grow up, they're going to be in the world at some point. And so I think maybe there's a little bit of some prejudice, I would say, and you can take issue with that. In fact, I'll let you take issue with that right now. But like homeschoolers, you're kind of being general about that. I don't know that everyone who's a homeschooling, it might just be that they do want to protect their kids while they can. So I don't know that that's
them from one
all bad.
I guess that's the problem is the connotation that they're being protected by not being exposed to contrary ideas. I don't think that's protecting them. I mean, if you're so uncertain in your faith that you don't think it can survive, Christopher Hitchens or something, or if your kid discovers, Nietzsche or something, I don't know what to tell you. You live in a big old world, and that idea that we're protecting kids by keeping them insular within the faith, I think is not right. And I don't know if that's prejudiced of me. I don't think it's right.
I just don't know if that's the aim. I think the way you're projecting that might be a little bit different than what a lot of parents feel, but I understand that that's the perception. So anyway, I'm going to go back to Devlyn. You're taking all this in and you're probably biting your tongue or ready to pounce. I'm not sure, or probably not, because you're not that type. But as we're talking here, I'm sure you have some thoughts. So I'm just going to let you chime in.
Yeah. I mean, I guess weighing in on the issue of children, I guess, Rob, for me, I don't see the decisions that we make about how we shape our children's faith values are any different than the moral compass or what we teach them about business and economics and the system of capitalism, or how we indoctrinate them with our political parties. To me, it's just, it seems like you're drawing a delineation between religion and other things when we do this in any number of manner of things with our kids.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
But I just have to add also that, I am the least confident ordained pastor that you're probably ever going to meet. And I fully believe that I think it is safe to assume that anybody that is 100% confident about anything, they scare me. How am I, as a very finite human being, to be able to understand an infinite God? And so if God has expressions to people outside of me in many other ways, how am I to question that? So I know how it is that I was called to pastor the church that I'm currently at, and how I'm called to walk alongside people and tell them that they're loved and forgiven. And that's as far out on that plank that I'm willing to walk, because I'm fallible, and I just fully admit that I can't comprehend an infinite universe.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about, like, how do you explain how the universe got here? And I guess not to fall into that category of people who are absolutely certain, and maybe letting my inner agnostic show here a little bit. Maybe it was intelligence design, and maybe I'm all wrong. Maybe it wasn't chance. Maybe there is some intelligence out there that did it, that caused it, that willed it into being, or however it was done. I don't have the answers, and sometimes I wonder if that answer matters all that much. I don't know. How the earth came to be doesn't really change how it is that much. I still have to get up and go to work in the morning and earn money and provide food and clothing for my children. It doesn't really change the fact that I think trying to be kind and charitable and honest is the best thing to do, because I expect those things from other people. And I certainly want people to be kind and honest with me and charitable with me as well. I sometimes wonder if those big questions matter all that much, or what happens after we die. I don't.
Yeah,
it's curious and it's existential. I just don't know. I don't know that it matters.
That's, as we were talking, I realized that's a good point in terms of it doesn't really matter if this is all the life there is, then it really doesn't matter. I mean, we just live our life and then we end and we die and that's it. So it doesn't really matter in that case how the earth was formed, or if there was a loving creator at the beginning of it, or if it just went boom and everything came forth. But there's some of us really do believe that there's a cohesiveness to this world, and that where there's creation, there's a creator. And not only that, but that creator had to exist outside of creation. And so that creator isn't one of us. We are in his image, but he isn't the same as us. He's outside of us. That's how he was our creator. And so because of that, he's infinite. And so there's an infinite world. And I think most people throughout history, I read something recently that 7% of people don't believe worldwide of any God at all, like when you take the whole population of the world. And I think it's different definitely in the Western culture, but in the whole world throughout time, it's been a pretty small percentage. And so I don't know. I know we're veering away from Christmas a little, but it is important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess my reaction to that, I mean, I don't really like having debates about the world start, because I don't know. I don't know. And it doesn't really matter that much to me. And,
well, and that's
when I hear other people's school of thoughts, and I say, okay, that's great. I mean, if believing that makes you happy, okay. It's no skin off my nose.
Yeah, I just thought of the other point is, I don't know that people of faith in general are also certain themselves. I mean, I think certain as far as we don't know either exactly how it started. We do believe there was a start. There's a lot of uncertainty for us too. What really does happen after we die? Well, nobody's lived to tell the tale, really. I mean, there's stories of near-death experiences and stuff like that, but we don't have all the answers either. So I would kind of want to challenge a little bit that idea that people of faith are certain, because I don't think faith. I think faith actually implies the opposite of that. That there's at some point there's a lack of certainty, and so that's it's just that we have our belief system, but there's a lot of uncertainty within that.
Yeah, this is the Oxford English Language definition of faith. It says complete trust or confidence in someone or something.
Yeah, trust in someone or something, but not knowing exactly everything about that someone or something. It just means that we trust that they have our best interest in mind. We're trusting that they are above us, that we are creatures and they are the creator. And so being the creator, they would know what's in our best interest. It is up to us, however, we're not puppets. That creator, that loving creator, gave us free will to learn how to love on our own terms. Otherwise, it wouldn't be love; it would be forced. And so that's what I'd say to that. Devlyn, do you have any thoughts about that?
It's interesting that Rob brings up the dictionary definition of that, because I probably fail if you put me against a litmus test like that. But everything I understand about the gospel and that is in our Bible, and Jesus' acceptance of a wide variety of people that did not follow in his footsteps. And never once have I ever felt that in the God that I know, that there is some strict adherence to a doctrine. And I know that may shock some, that a ordained pastor would say that, but again, I don't want to put shackles on an infinite God. And so if I need to believe that somehow that there is this human doctrine that has to apply to every situation in everybody's faith, I think that's our small minds at work. And I'm more than willing to let an infinite God run a chaotic universe that I can't. Sometimes I can't wrap my mind around.
I do think that the idea of faith, I guess the definition that I read to it, I think actually when when religions meet this definition, where they have complete confidence in it, is when they get in trouble. I think when you have complete confidence that Catholicism is the only way to live your life, that's when you start forcing people to go to boarding schools and doing forced conversions, right? When you believe that our religious teaching, what we believe in particular is the only way to live your life, that's where you get compounds and arranged marriages. So I struggle a little bit even with the term faith, because personally, when I think of faith, I do think of it as that absolute. That is the dictionary definition, and I think that's absolute belief. I think is where religion gets in trouble a lot.
I guess I take issue with that, Rob. I don't really know anyone in my circles who thinks everyone needs to think a certain way. We have our belief system, and we do our best each day to live it out and to stay close to Christ, and to Devlyn brought up the Holy Spirit, that Spirit of God that's living within us and is still with us, that we've been promised will never leave us. But I think I think that from what I'm hearing, your idea of how Christians operate, and I think maybe within that political sphere, that maybe that has seemed prominent to you, but I don't know that, like, on a day-to-day basis, that I go around thinking everyone needs to think just like me and that everyone needs to be Catholic. I understand.
As I specifically said, that's when religion gets in trouble. And I think that's
Mhm.
when religion does bad things, when we start, banning books because we don't want kids exposed to certain ideas or certain realities about the world. I do think that is when religion gets in trouble. I don't think that most Christians go around feeling that way all the time.
So,
But I,
like,
but I
since you
think
brought
that's
up
danger. I think that's the Rubicon you can cross.
banning books, so I just want to ask you, because you're a dad, like, would there be certain books that would there ever be a book, like a sexually explicit book, that you wouldn't want, like, your
Of course,
6-year-old to read?
of course.
So
I don't want my 9-year-old reading, Hustler.
right.
Um,
And I think, like, a large majority of people that are, I mean, book banning or called, I think it's really more that we want to have the books that are appropriate to
yeah,
each age level. It's
but
not that people are out there.
I have spent time looking at the books that they wanted banned, specifically here in North Dakota. And sometimes it's just an acknowledgement that gay people exist. That's it. There's nothing explicit in them. Now, some of the books they wanted gone were explicit, absolutely. Some of them just acknowledge it. It's like this little hamster has two dads. It was stuff like that. I don't. To me, that was hateful and ignorant, and the sort of insular faith that I think is wrong, and really what has driven me to not want to participate in that community at all. And again, recognizing that not all Christians are like that, but some are, and that is a path that faith can lead you on.
And so, would you disagree that maybe there are certain agendas that are being promoted in, say, literature, that maybe not everyone would want their
I
younger
think
child?
every piece of literature is an agenda. Of course there is. I don't know what we're so afraid of, though. If you want to live in a pluralistic society, if you want to live in a liberal society that values things like free speech and free expression and free practice of religion, then you're going to have to accept that your kids and yourselves are going to be exposed to things you don't like sometimes. That's the reality of the world.
I think as parents, though, we have the right and responsibility to be the guides of our children and to try to steer them in certain directions while we can. And then at some point, again, I've said it many times, they're going to be out in the world and they're going to figure things out. I don't know. A lot of religious people I know aren't keeping their kids in a closet. So I think that's a little bit of a
Yeah.
disingenuous idea. I think most people are out in the world, and, like, especially with technology, it's hard to not be in the world, even in your own
But I think
home.
that's a little naive when we're going to pretend like people aren't trying to ban To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean,
Yeah, and
these are real debates that are happening right now, Roxanne.
yeah.
I'm not
No, I
making.
understand. I love To Kill a Mockingbird, so I don't agree with, and that's one of the things too, is there is such variation among the Christian family, and so we have to be careful there too. And I'm sure, Rob, it's maybe one of the reasons that you're not drawn to it, because we are not unified always. But I think there is a principle inside that's unitive and that is worth striving towards. So, and obviously, Devlyn, you agree with that, right?
Yeah, I go back towards, for me, the principle is that God insists, and for each of us, that representation or the expression is going to be different. And I'm not offended if Rob calls that expression something else, whether it's chance or serendipity. I don't feel like in my mind that I have to own what I know God to be for me to be comfortable. So that's where I'm at.
Well, on that note, I do want to end on a happier tone. So, and obviously, this is.
I'm happy. I'm not angry about this stuff. This is challenging stuff. Talking about this.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. Obviously, I love it. That's why I'm doing this podcast. So, yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. It makes us think and try to like step into someone else's mind and experience. And I think that's all good. I think it's great. So I appreciate both of your perspectives. But I wanted to end on just a little bit of a lighter, I guess I could say, note and kind of get back to the Christmas theme. So, Rob, you kind of shared a little bit about some of your traditions or how you perceive it. What about you, Devlyn? What are some of your favorite Christian memories, traditions, or what you do with your family now?
Yeah. So things have probably changed in the last 8 years. Our tradition at Faith Lutheran is that we do a Christmas Eve service. And it's a beautiful service. We end with the lights out in the church with lighted candles and singing peace, peace, and so that has become a very important piece of my Christmas. Obviously, we don't go anywhere during the holidays. That's an occupational hazard now, as you would say, and so we go home Christmas Eve, and that's kind of our family time. We'll do, a meal. We have a couple of traditions of reading Luke 2 and Psalm 23rd Psalm, and then trying to share just some family time together. And as probably both of you could attest to, the older your kids get, the harder it is to get everybody in one spot at the same time. And so in those moments, I'm very grateful for that. And then on December 5th, Christmas itself, I really try to take kind of a Sabbath day, because the month of December, just being clergy is the schedule is pretty brutal. And I think it works out well for our family that our kids then can go attend, their significant others or other places on the 25th. So this may, I don't know, this may shock a lot of people, but I love spending the day grabbing a newspaper and watching some football and just kind of disconnecting because I find peace in that day.
Beautiful. I have a little tradition that I'd like to share. My family is pretty musical, both sides. My husband's as well. And my mom lives in a complex in Bismarck that has mostly elderly people living in it. And I don't know when we started this, probably like 10 years ago, but we decided to go Christmas caroling throughout the building. So we just go, there's 6 large floors, and we start at the bottom, and my sister was a music teacher in elementary, and her husband is a high school music teacher, so they kind of lead the pack, and we have little songbooks. And our kids, through the years have kind of like grumbled about it, but we just go in each floor and sing Christmas carols, and people pop their heads out of their houses or their little units, and it's just a beautiful, fun tradition that we've done. To be on the receiving end, I'm sure I would love it. I know one time someone came to our unit when I was with my mom on Christmas and sang, and it just made us smile. So music is always, I think, like for me, a part of Christmas, like, at Mass. I love midnight Mass, going there and hearing the beautiful music and just hearing the kind of the Christmas story and about Jesus coming to earth and God becoming man and wanting to be part of our world. It's just, there's such a warmth there. And then, leaving at whatever time it is, usually starts before midnight, so it's close to midnight when we leave, and sometimes the snow is falling, and it's just beautiful. So those are some of my fond memories, and I just, do you have any more, Rob, that you wanted to share? We kind of cut you off a little bit there. You were starting to talk about getting your decorations out of the basement, but
Yeah, well, I think that was my fault where I took us down a rabbit hole.
That's okay.
Several existential topics. No, I one of my favorite memories. I was a paper boy starting in the 4th grade, and I always liked Christmas. First of all, especially when I was young, because I was so proud that I had a job, and I was making my own money. I was making $100 a month. I don't know how they were getting away with that, but I wasn't making much money. But I was so proud of it. And on Christmas, of course, it was a morning paper, so I would get up, 7 days a week at 4:00 in the morning. But on Christmas, they would deliver the papers late in the evening, and I would deliver them, so everybody could have the full day of Christmas off. And my and a lot of times the Christmas edition was very big, and I couldn't, especially when I was younger, I couldn't carry the whole thing. So my dad would come with sometimes, but I always enjoyed delivering papers on Christmas Eve, because a lot of houses would be dark because people were gone out of town visiting family. But a lot of them would be full of people, right? And there'd be cars on the street, and the lights would be on, and you could hear, the house full of people, and they're chattering and they're laughing, or sometimes yelling and fighting, far less often, but that's a part of the human experience too. And I loved it so much, just kind of walking around. I was out in the dark, they couldn't see me. And I could look in at all these families celebrating and being together and being inside, and it's warm. I really loved that memory. The paper boy is a thing of the past now, but I guess I'll always hold that with me. I kind of wish it was still a thing so that, my son or my daughters could deliver papers and experience that. But that is a really good memory of walking around and everybody being up and seeing them play board games and everything. And kind of knowing everybody was doing the same thing, or not everybody, but most people were doing the same thing that we were. I really enjoyed that.
I love that, Rob. That's such a cool memory. And I think of the crisp air, I'm sure sometimes it was super cold, but at the same time, there's something about that makes you alert, right? And makes you wake up. And I just see you out there looking into these houses. I'm just such an observer too.
Not in a creepy way. Not in a creepy way.
No. But just that warmth, that happiness, and just that there's something about winter too that kind of brings us together, and we're not out, at least in this part of the world, right? We're just kind of huddled in our homes with our families. And really that's what it's all about. We're all parents here. We are parents who love our children, and we just want to give them the best world that we can, and just to love. And so I think that's something that unifies us all. And before we leave, I do want to ask Devlyn about his new job, because he's working with Churches United for the Homeless. Tell us a little bit about that real quickly, Devlyn, and what sort of needs are that you want from the community right now.
Yeah, so it's been a bullet train of 3 months. I started here in August, and we kind of jumped into a difficult situation. We have some financial challenges that are pretty steep, and so we're still trying to figure out kind of the short term of how we get from here to kind of July of next year, because that's when the new fiscal year would kick in for the state of Minnesota. And it is a long conversation about how we got here. I know a lot of people ask that, but it's not negligence. It's not there's even though we have a temptation to want to blame a scapegoat, there's just a lot of situations with nonprofits right now that since the pandemic, the model is broken. And for our particular interests, the idea that somehow only the churches are going to carry forward the work that we do here it's just outdated. There are societal issues that bring people to our doors, and we could rattle off any number of them. So we do need the community to support us. We are still out there actively working hard to secure large donors to help us give us a long-term future. But if you have some year-end giving, would be very grateful because right now we have a November 30th deadline. We got to get beyond that November 30th deadline, or we are going to have to start talking about closing a food pantry or closing a shelter that's home to 120 people.
Right. And by the time this drops, we'll be after that deadline. But hopefully we can do everything we can in our community to make this as good of a Christmas as we can, as blessed of a Christmas for those in our community that are unhoused and needing warmth, especially in this part of this year. So where can people go to, because this could extend beyond our community, if they wanted to help this organization, nonprofit?
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. I just like to remind folks that Churches United serves people in a 100-mile radius. So this isn't just a Fargo-Moorhead issue. This is an eastern North Dakota, northwestern Minnesota issue. And outside of Minneapolis, we are the largest shelter in this region. So you can go to our website, churchesunited.org. There is a donate button there. In addition to, there's other ways you can get involved, from donating your time and talents too. We always need volunteers in our kitchens, the food pantry, and there's just tons of folks here that even could just use somebody to sit down and have a meal with them. That's the actual gospel, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have a good friend that I walk with once a week, and she's very, very active there, Lori Knoll. So I'm sure you'll see her around there. But gentlemen, it was so nice to talk to you. Honestly, I just love this conversation and, with our different ideas and our different perspectives. So thank you both for taking time out. And I just want to wish everyone a very blessed Christmas, and we will catch you on the other side. Thank you to you both.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
So who is Jesus? For one of my guests, Jesus is an historical person who lived and died, but little more. For my other guest and for me, Jesus is the Savior of the world, whose message can lead this world to freedom and whose saving grace is available to all who seek peace and hope. He is, in a word, everything. The cradle and cross are not so far apart as it turns out. Baby Jesus is not some cartoon character that simply makes us feel good. Rather, his life and love challenge us to order our lives in service to others, to think less of ourselves and more of our neighbor, and to live as if we were dying because, well, we are, and to make our earthly days count, always with one eye on eternity, where we will spend the majority of our lives, either in a perpetual state of light or darkness. The person who most exemplifies this to me, of living as if we were dying, is my mother-in-law, Bev, whom we lost this past December 7th. Her absence has left a great hole in our hearts, and I'm so sad that she's not with us anymore, but so happy that she lived her life in a way that brought joy to those she met and left everyone feeling that they were valued. I ask for your prayers this Christmas as we mourn her loss. And I'm excited that I found an old recording that she and I did as a duet in December of 2010 at her church during Christmas time. The song, I Wander as I Wander, I hope will bring peace to your heart. It is a tribute to my lovely mother-in-law, Beth. In our next episode, we'll ask whether God can work through flawed politicians. That will mark 1 year of Matters of Soul Importance content coming into your hearts and souls, and I can't wait for the rest of the year to unfold. I hope that you will have a wonderful Christmas, and as you see baby Jesus in the manger, Christmas Eve, with the sparkling star of Bethlehem above him, remember, don't lose sight of the light.